appropriate remark.
Mine
Not
wasn't
only that, that's
running. Was this running?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Mine's on now.
Yeah.
Sure, Steve. I'll
Edit
give you an autograph anytime.
Yeah, and apologies. Apologies to the audience, because that was not an appropriate remark.
Sorry.
All right, let's start her off.
Sounds good. I'm Dr. Larry Burchett, Dr. Steve Maron, the president
Hey, everyone.
of VEP. And we're going to talk about wellness and burnout today.
Important topics, because it affects a lot of people, and it's beneath the surface. You often don't see it when people are suffering from it.
Yeah, I mean, what a great thing. The president of the group is willing to have this conversation. That's a pretty cool thing.
It's a different organization. We were founded by our providers. We are provider-owned, provider-run, so we are caring about our providers in a way that others just don't. You know, if you're a for-profit company, you're worried about your profits and you're worried about Wall Street. That's just not us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so to go along with that, this past December at our shareholder meeting, we brought a national expert in on wellness and burnout, Dr. Dyke Drummond, a physician himself, to begin this conversation about burnout, wellness, and what we can do about it.
He was great. We had a big turnout. He livened up the whole audience. People were engaged. He was asking questions and people were throwing back answers. It wasn't like that, everybody's hiding. He touched a nerve with people at that meeting.
What was that nerve?
I think he addressed something that we don't like to talk about. I mean, we're the superheroes, right? All of us providers of emergency medicine, we just go, go, go. We do what's necessary. We were beat when we were in medical school and residency to take care. And he said, whoa, that's not compatible with just being a normal human, which has needs, wants, and desires, and has to have a chance to regenerate. And he brought that to the surface.
Totally. Yeah, as you're talking, I'm just kind of getting back into it and thinking about all that stuff. We're at different points in our career, but I've kind of been working long enough that I've experienced some of that myself. Just going through medical school, residency, and we actually went to the same residency. Probably a little different in your time than mine, but when I went was before all the work hour stuff and where that was really a big deal. And we did get pounded into the ground.
The surprising thing to me is not that you're starting to experience it at your stage in your career, but that you have the capacity to discuss it. Because most of us were brought up to not discuss these challenges, right? Suck it up. You know, work the extra hours. And now a whole generation is saying that's not healthy, and more importantly, it doesn't promote longevity. So if you can't continue for your whole career and you drop out after half a career, what good was it to work those extra shifts? You ended up not working as much, not taking care of as many people in your whole career.
It's interesting. I think there's a bit of a crossroads. Like in residency, I felt like, kind of like you just said, where you don't talk about it. You just go through, this is what you got to do to get to it. It's a passing, a ritual. And then getting out after so many years, it's kind of like, I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to work that crazy, torturous, why am I, you kind of start asking these questions and then the conversation starts.
One of the things that Dr. Drummond discussed was that reservoir, and that most people, you have, a big reservoir, and if you get down to zero, then you're done. Makes sense, you're empty. But for emergency medicine providers and hospitalist providers, you can get down to zero, and then you go into this reserve that you didn't even know you had, where you put your head down and you just keep going forward. And you have to regenerate that, or you burn out.
How do you regenerate that?
He gave us at that seminar, cut there, how do I regenerate?
Yeah.
I think I've been fortunate in that there's a diversity of items that include my career. So while I'm still seeing patients, I also have some office stuff, I have some leadership stuff, I have some extracurricular activities. And so all of that helps me from getting too deep into where I'm just seeing patients and burning out.
Change it up a little bit. You're not just, 18-hour shifts every day in the ER.
And you can't lose the enjoyment you get from seeing the patients. So in a sense, that is regenerating for me. That if I do have to work an extra shift, you're working a little harder, but I get stories out of that.
Yeah.
And I take out of that, I say, I got to come home and tell my daughters about some of the cases I saw.
Yeah, talk a little more about that. So I want to highlight this for a second. one of the things that he's talked about a lot, kind of went more into in the book, is focusing on the parts of the job, like when you're in the ER, the things that you really like, and kind of seeking out those experiences more. So I wonder if you're kind of taking home some of the good stories, and that's a way of coping or taking meaning out of a tough job.
When I walk into that room, I kind of block out everything else. So I'm not the president of VEP, and I don't have a list of emails I need to respond to. I'm just one-on-one with that patient.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy that interaction.
You're present in the moment.
Yeah. And during my shift, my phone may be ringing, but I'm not answering it. If it's critical, somebody else can address that.
Yeah.
But I get to deal with kind of the moment. And that's pretty rewarding.
It's kind of funny you say that. Like I've had this odd experience because I go to very different sites all over California, and sometimes I'm gone for 5 days a week at a time. And a lot of people say, well, isn't that kind of tough in your way and whatever? And I think kind of like you're saying, I like it. It's almost freeing in a way where it simplifies my life. Like when I'm there in the ER in that moment, that's all I'm doing. That's all you can do. It's busy enough. You can't get distracted. You have other things going on. And there's something that's oddly freeing about that and nice.
Yeah. I remember in residency, one of the problems that a lot of us dealt with was alcoholism. And I used to think if I could get 1 out of 20 alcoholics to stop drinking, that would be my measure of success.
Mm.
I don't know if that's a high bar or low bar, but for me, I thought it was reasonable. And so every time I worked with an alcoholic and they went back to drinking or I couldn't get them sober, it was like, aha, I'm just that much closer to the 20th one where I'll be successful. And when you do get a success story, it just charges you up.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely something about mentality in there, that how you approach it and see things can help make your day better.
I'll give you another interesting story. Earlier on, when I would go to my kids' soccer games, I would be there to watch the soccer game for the whole soccer game on a Saturday. But I might be on my phone almost all the time taking care of other items. And I thought I checked the box that said, you're there.
Mm.
But as you said earlier, I wasn't in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I needed somebody from the outside to point that out to me. I never realized it myself.
Mm-hmm.
And when I turned off the phone and watched the game, it was a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's part of addressing burnout, is being in the good moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at some level, your family and your kids know.
Yeah. And family's important. You may have spent time with your wife or your partner, scratch that. You may have spent time with your partner before going out on date night or something, and now a shift comes up and you cancel it, and then it happens a second time, and you think it's okay, but your partner has missed out on that.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of say, okay, I'm going to work this, but let's change that to Tuesday night we'll go out because I have to go out tonight and work. But we're not going to postpone it forever, we're just postponing it for 5 days. And that gives it a different feeling.
Date night now. Is there anything from Dyke's talk, was there anything in specific that you took away as things, maybe life balance stuff that could help you?
Absolutely. Date night was one of them. It was that idea of committing time to something outside of your profession.
Like putting it on your schedule and
Right.
protecting
Write it in. Write it in. Put it on. And then when somebody says, are you free on Friday to work a shift? And you look and you say, oops, I can't do Friday night. I could do Saturday, but I can't do Friday night. I've already committed. And you make that an important commitment.
I bet your wife was happy about that.
It worked out well for us.
It's still going on. The seeds of Dyke Drummond are...
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. He also talked about your frustrations. I remember he spoke about you leave the work, you didn't get things done. Nurses may have been pounding on you to get this metric or that thing done. And by the time you got home, you were still in that frustration. You go through the door and you took it out on whoever was the first one to see you.
Yeah.
He talked about taking all that frustration, anger, sticking it in a bag, sealing the bag, and leaving it before you got out of your car. So you went in to greet everybody in your family, refreshed and
leave it at work.
Yep.
And you've got, this is a really good topic because it's going to carry throughout everybody's career is work-life balance. You want to do a great job of work, you want to be good at what you do, but then how do you integrate the two of those, having a family life and a life outside of work and having a good work life.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges we have is that we're in a field which has a shortage of manpower. So there's not enough hospitalists, there's not enough PAs, there's not enough MDs across the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And part of this is because more and more people are accessing healthcare, which is a good thing, but we don't have the supply. So whether you work with VEP or another group, you're still being asked, can you do more? Can you do more? Oh, and let me add to that, metrics. Can you do more and see the patient sooner? Can you do more and discharge sooner? Can you document better? Can you check off these HCAPs? And so the demands keep increasing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a shoulder weight.
Burden.
That's a weight on our shoulders.
Yeah. So, and especially coming from you, the president of the company, we've got shifts we have to fill. How do we balance that dilemma with, provider wellness?
Right. I think we need to see the long-term vision. If we're just doing everything we can to get through this week, we burn out people, and then you can't go for the long term. So it's a matter of Valley saying, VEP saying, the long-term strategy is to make providers enjoy their careers and be able to make it all the way to their end of their careers.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do in the short term? We'll have to come up with bandages. Somebody does have to work this shift. But what if you came up with a strike team?
Mm-hmm.
Individuals who said, I'll be available to jump in when needed, so that the main crew won't be overtaxed. We have an example of that now at one of our hospitals, where the main crew does pretty well, but they lost 2 providers within 30 days. Our strike team guys went in and said, we'll lift up some of the burden until we can recruit some new guys in. And the senior guys, they had to do some extra during this period as well. But at least they had kind of the cavalry arriving.
I'm going to pull up our book. This is the Dyke book, Stop Physician Burnout. It's a little advertisement for you. You can get a copy of this. Just contact Rachel Zaragoza, provided by the group. So here, this is page 15, chapter 1. I want to think about, while you're talking about this stuff, the long-term vision, what you think about this. So this says, physician burnout has been linked to lower quality care, lower patient satisfaction, higher medical errors, higher malpractice, blah, 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 blah. Do you think if we really make this investment in our providers that it not only makes the doctors happier, but we might, do a better job? It really might make us a better organization. Like, what do you think about that?
So the first is denial. That's not true. I can be just as good after 27 hours of straight work as I was the first hour. That's what I was taught. I could be in that OR helping out somebody, or in the ER listening to a patient. So denial. You have to get past the denial to realize you're not really paying attention to the patient. You're just saying, how do I stay asleep? Do I bite my lip? Do I chew on my tongue? How am I going to stay awake while the patient talks? And so we are doing those things that he mentions. We're not providing as good a quality of care because we're pushing ourselves sometimes.
Yeah. When I hope this stuff is true, that by addressing burnout and wellness and all this stuff, that it'll actually make the numbers better, I mean, you talk about the profit side of this stuff, and I wonder if we really make an investment in our people, if that will at some point show up in the bottom line.
I'll give you a neat example. A neat example. We are putting together this new program at one of our sites. You have a doctor who works during the day, and then she or he is on call at night. What we came up with is during the night they get called for all sorts of minor things. This is an inpatient physician. Gets called for all sorts of minor things, has to deal with. We said, what if we pay you, doc, half as much per hour? And we use the other half of that money to have a mid-level be first up for all those calls. Now you go home, you can be with your family, you don't get hardly any phone calls unless it's something that needs you to come in. It increases your longevity. Meanwhile, the mid-level, who's only there for the normal shift hours, comes in, feels good, takes care of everything during his or her shift, goes home. And economically, it was the same cost as paying that physician to be on call, taking all the first calls.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it was pretty innovative.
Well, there's some creative solutions to that isn't going to cost the bottom line or anything. And another one that makes me think about that is scribes.
Yeah.
I don't know what the dollars and cents of it is, but I just know when I have scribes, I can see more patients, and that I gotta think that in the right setting that has to pay for itself.
Yeah, with a scribe, you need to see about 0.2 patients more per hour. So in a 10-hour shift, you need to see 2 extra patients to pay for the scribe.
Oh, that's nothing.
You ought to be able to see 2 extra patients because now you're not doing all this charting.
Yeah.
Or think about at the end of your shift, what do? Some people go home. A lot of us have to stick around for an extra hour or 2 to do our charting.
A lot of people do that.
Well, so instead of staying around for an hour or 2, you were able to see 2 more patients and go home on time.
Sounds good to me.
And so it's a paradigm shift that we're going to have somebody else do work that we can do, but doesn't make sense for us to do.
Yeah, no, it all sounds good to me.
And even if you were the physician who's paying for it, in a sense, you're extending your own career, and so it economically makes sense for you as an individual.
Have you worked at many sites that have scribes?
I have, probably about 3.
Yeah.
I love it.
I haven't worked at very many. I mean, Madeira has scribes. Merced has scribes. Those are the 2 that I've worked at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Plains Regional, when I worked there, you'd come on, the person would be right there, they'd be taking your notes. They can take pretty good notes. You get through the whole thing, you're signing off on all of this. It's like I get to go home at the end of my shift. I don't have to stick around for hours.
You know, the thing that I like about it the best is I don't feel as rushed. Like I have to get out of the room and run and put in my orders and document. And so I feel like I have an extra couple minutes where I can actually sit there and listen more. And I feel like it enables me to kind of be more of the doctor I want to be. And that's satisfying. Like that makes me happier. So it's not like the scribe itself, but it gives me that opportunity to kind of do that.
Another plus, being the doctor you want to be, is now when I go through my physical exam, I go through and I say it out loud so my scribe can record it.
Mm-hmm.
Your ears look fine. I don't see any problem in your throat.
Mm-hmm.
There's no nodes in your neck. That's a good sign. So I'm giving information to the patients who appreciate that.
They probably like to hear it.
Before, I would just go through my silent physical exam, and then I go silently write it all down.
Yeah. One of the scribes was telling me the other day that he was talking about how it was difficult to work with this one doctor because he never says anything. So they're just kind of guessing, like, was that a normal exam? And it made me think about that saying it out loud, patients like to hear, oh, good, yeah, my heart's okay. You know, makes them kind of feel better, reassured.
Another topic you're getting to, you mentioned how you've worked at multiple sites.
Mm-hmm.
In burnout, sometimes it's the environment that creates it. A physician contacted me this weekend. He said, at this busy site, he gets paid twice as much, but he doesn't enjoy it as much as the low volume site, where he spends more time interacting with the nurses, more time interacting with the patients. He's a social person.
Yeah.
It's okay to try to find out what's the best mix for you. Busy, slow, intermediate, inner city, or community. Not everyone has to like every location.
We have some very different places. I mean, I started in Quincy at Plumas District Hospital when there were 10 patients in a day. And we can talk about burnout or not, but you did 48-hour shifts. Sometimes most of the time you slept all night. There was nobody there. But then at MLK, gosh, sometimes they're seeing 3-4 patients an hour with scribes. I mean, it's a very different kind of medicine. I think kind of like this guy, I like doing it a little more slower. I've got a little more time. I don't know if I could cut it at a 3 to 4 an hour place.
Yeah, or maybe you could and you start to get addicted to the money. Gee, the hourly is great here. So I'm going to do it. So I'm going to sign up for these shifts. Hey, I like this money. Honey, we can get a bigger house or a larger car.
I didn't say that.
You were addicted to that money.
And I think there's an adrenaline running. It's a different feeling when you're doing that job.
So if you enjoy it and that's life extending for you, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if you're not, but then you get trapped and say, I don't like this anymore, but now I have debt that requires me to keep making this income.
Yeah.
I think that's a recipe for burnout.
Wow. I didn't think you were going to say some of these things.
It's 25 years of experience. And you've seen it. I get the benefit of not just my own experiences, but a lot of other people come and talk to me.
Yeah.
So I get to share that within the group.
Yeah.
You're taking on too much debt, and then you become forced to work more than what you think is healthy.
Yeah.
Or you might have enjoyed going off and doing projects. Maybe it was international work. But now you've got so much debt that you can't take time off. You can't even take your vacations.
As you're saying this, like, I'm wondering, we're kind of getting into other things too. This isn't just, I mean, some of it we're talking about lifestyle and balancing your life, and then we're kind of talking about decisions we make and how our life goes and taking on debt and all these things. And it's just making me, kind of include all of it in this conversation.
I think about some of these young doctors who come out, and the average young doctor today, sit down, $200,000 to $300,000 in debt when they join BEP, and sometimes they feel that obligation to pay off that debt as quick as possible. So I don't want to have all that pressure on me. I'm going to work all these extra shifts. I'm going to do 20 shifts a month. I'm going to get that debt paid off. But of course, life comes along, and so now you still have to buy a car and you have to buy a house, and it takes longer and longer to pay off that debt. The advice I give, I say, think of your debt as a house payment. You owe $300,000. That's what a house mortgage might cost you.
Yeah.
So you're going to stretch it out over 30 years. You're going to make your payments on it every month for the next 30 years, and don't feel the pressure to have to get it all paid off at once. Then it's just a structured payment every month you write your check.
You'd say it's okay to stick with the debt, pay it off a little bit at a time.
Yeah, you might even be able to leave it to your kids.
Nice guy. It's true. I came out with 160. That was from a state med school, and it's down to about 148. I did not race to pay that thing off, but I had a friend of mine who worked with me in Mendocino was she had over 300,000, but she did exactly what part of it was probably a good thing for her. She had the opportunity to work some extra shifts and pay it down.
Yeah. If that works, great. But don't let that add to your reasons to become burned out.
Man, it's a lot of money.
Hey, without that debt, would you be a doctor?
No, it's part of the deal.
Yeah.
This is a different topic. At least we have the ability to make that money to pay it off. There's a lot of students coming out these days that, I think physical therapy now, they're doing PhDs and they have to pay for it. It's not like a sociology PhD where you get to be a grad student and it's paid for. You have this they have the same amount of debt, but you can't make as much,
For me, I haven't forgot how fortunate I am to be able to be a doc. I get satisfaction of it. I picked up a lot of debt, but I wouldn't have been a doc without it. And I haven't forgot how fortunate we are in healthcare compared to so many other professions, so many other jobs. So that's...
We're lucky. I agree. Yeah. We're really lucky.
Now let me ask you, how do other people who may have lost that feeling, how do they get back?
This is a great story. This is one of the hospitalists at MLK. She's been there for a few months. She's a good doctor, and she had spent this one day almost an hour with a really difficult case of a patient who hadn't taken care of herself and came in with a really tough cancer going through her skin, and she'd spent all this time working on her pain, back and forth, and the patient had a history of drug issues, and it's just a difficult case. And she, at the end of the day, she kind of had this lingering feeling of, am I doing a good job? Am I good enough? She didn't feel like she had done the whole thing. And I pulled her aside and I was like, first of all, you are good enough. I know you as a doctor. You're a really good doctor. And you care. You spent all that time with that patient. You should feel good about that at the end of the day. I think it's partially this med school competitive, we're never good enough. She's really ambitious and wants to do it all. She wants her patient to, her pain to be a 0 and the patient to be completely happy. I don't know if that's realistic in this case, It's a complicated patient. The point is, she did a great job, and I said, at the end of the day, you should feel good about that. You ought to be able to look at that in a way that says, you know what, I spent more time than a lot of people would. I cared about this patient. I did my best. the patient's better today than they were yesterday. I'm going to come back tomorrow and we're going to take another step, you know. But that, for me, I've worked on that too in the same way. At the end of the day, and I'll do this, like I'll look at all the patients that I've seen and I'll say, wow, that's a lot of people that, you know, we've made a difference with today. Go ahead.
What brought you to this topic of burnout? Why did you bring it to BEP?
Oh, that's a good question. You know, I've been a shareholder since the beginning. Since I could first buy shares, I bought them. And, you know, back when we had 3 shareholder meetings in a year. And so, you know, I come and we, you know, do the same thing every time. We review all of the kind of the state of the company and go through the numbers. And then we look at, you know, the things that we vote on and all that. And then the Sunday, there's a day of usually a CME topic of whatever. And for me, and you and I have talked a lot about mission, I always wanted more mission. I wanted those shareholder meetings to be a time where we can reconnect. And you would give these little drops, these little snippets that I was like, oh, don't get me wrong. I love hearing about the numbers where I was like, Steve, just talk for 10 minutes about, I even remember some of the things you said where you're like, you know, we have the challenge of going into a room and within seconds trying to get the trust of a parent when they brought us the most important thing in their life. I remember you saying it almost like that. And I was like, God, that's incredible that he sees it that way. That's so true. And I wanted more of that. Like I wanted to continue to develop as a doctor along those lines, to be inspired. You know, I think I was, and I probably wasn't conscious of it, but I was probably a little, I don't know if burnout was the word, but just hungry to reconnect with some of the, you know, more spiritual mission of why I went into medicine. And we don't do that very much at the shareholder meetings. It's a lot of business, you know. It's a lot of business, it's a lot of voting, and I know it needs to happen, but I was like, you know, I wonder if with the group and the providers, and you know, are we ready for this? Is this something that we can integrate with the group? And you know, it was partially about me too. Like I want to feel more inspired when I go to work, and I thought that might be a place and time to do it as a group.
Do you think burnout, or does Dyke talk about burnout in part as losing touch with why you went into medicine, or losing touch with the spiritual reinforcement of it?
Yeah, I just reviewed this in the book, actually. Let me pull out the 3 things that he says, because I think he puts it pretty well. Let me return to the text for a moment. Here it is. 3 symptoms of burnout. 1, exhaustion, physically tired. I feel like I could deal with that. That one wasn't as big. Number 2, depersonalization, also known as compassion fatigue, or when you get sarcastic. And then 3 is lack of efficacy, like you're not very good anymore. And I think that middle one, like along the spiritual stuff for me is, I didn't feel it. Like with medicine, there's so much richness, there's so much potential to be satisfied as a doctor with what we do. Even the basic stuff that's not terribly heroic or brilliant or anything, I think you can, I think you can feel really at peace, incredible, satisfied from what most of us do every day.
Sometimes we don't recognize the burnout.
Yeah.
We had a physician who used to approach patients anytime they came in after midnight. We'd start off, so what is your emergency at 1:30 in the morning? He had lost his compassion.
I'm sure that I've never said that, but I'm sure my body language has said that plenty of times at 3 in the morning.
So go back 10 years, we'd say, well, that physician, he's not a good person, or he doesn't care, you know. And instead, we could today say, maybe we've recognized that as a symptom of burnout. We can address his or her burnout so that instead of saying, don't say that, we're saying, you have a symptom of something that's treatable. We can make you healthier so you won't feel that way, and therefore you won't say it. What a better way to approach it.
Yeah, no, and it's totally true. And I think, like, when I started, I remember, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, but when I started, especially at Sonoma, I was there for 6 years. At the beginning, they loved me. I was up for Doctor of the Year every year. I never won, but and then like by year like 5 or 6, finally, the director sat me down and we do the evaluations. Jared was really good about doing the evaluations, and there was all of this stuff from the nurses that was not good, and a couple of the nurses had even kind of taken me aside and they were like, "What's going on? And I wasn't in it, but I remember there being that dramatic, and he, he didn't say burnout or put it in that terms, but he was like, nurses usually like you. What's going on? What's the problem? And that was kind of I think that was one of the big things where I was like, because my mother was a nurse. My mom was an ICU nurse and she taught nursing. And I was like, and so it was kind of like, would I ever treat my mom like that? It was like one of these moments where I was like, okay, there's a problem. Like, I need to deal with this.
You ever heard of a company that has a position called Vice President of Provider Development?
The Gary Tampkin role.
You never hear about that title. But we recognized years ago that you need to have somebody who was focused on providers.
Yeah.
So Gary Tampkin is in this role. Somebody listening to these snippets is thinking, boy, they're kind of describing me.
Yeah.
Where do I go for help?
Yeah.
Well, so Gary can work with you. And we had a director who was one of our stellar directors. Everybody loved him. He did great. But we got some backwoods conversations. He wasn't quite so great. We did did some research. Gary talked to all the nurses, and that same thing. And Gary brought him down to the office.
The thing is, it's so effective is because they write it down, and even though there's no names, you know who it's from, and you're just like, oh man.
Yeah. And it's not just one nurse. Gary speaks to all the nurses.
That's the process.
Techs. And when he spoke to the doctor, and initially it's like, gosh, why am I being attacked? I'm a good person. But if you can get past that and start to say, what's the next step? And when Gary says, why do you think you changed from being, director of the decade to being groused about by the nurses?
Yeah.
And he says, well, you know what, this and it's that. And Gary put together a program to change his life. You're not going to be saying, yes, I'll take every hole in the schedule. You're not going to be driving to all these meetings that your hospital CEO says you have to go to that are hours away.
Mm-hmm.
And pared it back to a manageable degree where the director became effective again.
Mm-hmm.
People started enjoying working with him again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure this is not something new for you guys.
Yeah. The intriguing thing to me was, it wasn't docs or mid-levels who you said, oh, well, that guy's been problematic since the beginning. You had a lot of people who were stars, like yourself, who then hit the wrong side of the slope.
Yeah.
And so it's important for all of us to recognize that none of us are superhuman. None of us are beyond it. The trick is, how do you recognize it? Or listen when somebody tells you, hey, I'm seeing these trends, I'm seeing these patterns.
Or you start to listen and hear. You kind of got to start to feel it and get...
Go back to Dyke's comments, where he says, you start to recognize you're getting burned out when you're angry when you get home. You're angry when you get up before you get to your shift.
Mm-hmm.
When you're upset at the nurses and they haven't done anything.
Yeah.
When you don't want to see more patients. He lists the symptoms in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the questions that I've asked before is, what are your symptoms of burnout? I don't know if you have any. I know what mine are. Like, and a lot of it is, have I been sleeping? Have I been taking care of myself outside of the ER? Not just have I been working too much, but have I been sleeping, taking care of myself, exercising, all that. But when I get into the ER and I'm kind of burnt out, it's the same kind of stuff. Like, I'll be irritated with a patient that I don't think needs to be there. Or nurses, I'm not patient. Or, just like we were talking about before, I'm not present in that moment in the room with the patient. And it's interesting how my inability to do that then will affect, the satisfaction I'm able to take from doing a good job. I know that I'm not doing as good of a job, but it's a matter of having that inner kind of gauge on it and knowing, and then being able to say, okay, why am I like this? What do I need to, I need to get more sleep. Or, you know what, I can't do 6 in a row. 4 is probably the max, and then I need a day or 2 off, and then I need to reschedule it, whatever, going forward,
And Dr. Drummond's interesting because he experienced the burnout himself.
Mm-hmm.
Not once.
A couple times.
But twice. So he speaks from a place of knowledge and had to figure out, how do I resurrect my career? You don't want to be just kicked to the curb because you have burnout. So he has a lot of good ideas in there. Some of the ideas, he says, you can start this one today. This isn't you have to do this for 9 months to see an improvement. You can start these changes today.
Mm-hmm.
With VEP, we'll support you.
Mm-hmm.
When you say, hey, I can't do all these night shifts, or I can't keep working 10 shifts a month. I know it's only 10 and there's 30 days in the month, but I just can't. VEP looks at you and says, how do we make you a healthy physician or mid-level? Let's make the changes in your life. What's the parts that's the most difficult? Do you need a little administrative work on top of your clinical? Change the balance up.
Mm-hmm.
A little stimulation in another area.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's giving lectures. Whatever it is, let's change things up so that you can extend your career in a healthy fashion.
I'm really surprised to hear you say that. That's great to hear. It's inspiring. I mean, it makes me, that exceeds my expectations.
The mission statement for VEP says to take care of patients in need within an environment that supports the providers.
That's part of the mission.
It's part of our mission.
Yeah.
Taking care of our providers.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
So it isn't just Dr. Tampkin who's a resource. Dr. Drummond gives courses, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Or conferences.
Yeah, well, and he's got a website that's got a whole bunch of tools on it and things you can use. I mean, this book is a great place to start, really. And we actually have a link to the video from December that we have available for everybody. That'll probably go out in an email that they can actually just click on it and watch, so that they can get kind of jump start into the conversation. It was good talk.
Yeah.
So those are places to start. And then, we're hopeful that at your site there will be a wellness champion, the wellness champ. And if you want to be that person, you can talk to me or Dr. Tampkin. And hopefully this is kind of just the beginning of the conversation, and we can kind of continue this at each site, because we're all over the place. It's hard to kind of connect the dots, but not just all over California, but how many states are we in now?
7 different states?
7. California, Ohio, West Virginia, where else?
North Carolina?
Carolina.
Kansas?
That's right, Kansas.
Texas? Now, I need you to do a disclaimer here.
Uh-oh.
Are you making any money off this book?
Unfortunately, I'm making no money off of any of this, which is something I would like to talk about, Steve. Glad you brought that up.
Then we'll cut to commercial break. So, no, we don't have any affiliation.
We don't have any vested interest in this. We bought a bunch of books because we want to do
But our
that.
vested interest is in our providers.
Right.
And this is the way for our providers to be healthy.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just the ER, it's hospitalist. Hospitals have another unique set of pressures on them, and scheduling and length of shifts. We do these 12-hour shifts as hospitalists typically. Maybe that's not the right length of shift for you as an individual. And you think, well, but the schedule is just 12-hour shifts. MLK, how long are the shifts?
They're 12s, yeah.
And there's 5 shifts a day. But what if you were most healthy if you only did a 10-hour shift?
7 shifts a day.
7 a day.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were most healthy if you only did a 10-hour shift. And you went to the program director and you said, I think not only I, but perhaps other people would do well with a 10-hour shift. Can we have one of those 7 shifts be a 10-hour? I bet you the program would do fine with one 10-hour shift.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And if you rotated through, you knew that every 7 shifts you would have a 10-hour one.
It's not a bad idea. You know what helped? Because 12 hours are long. Like when I've done, used to do 7s at MLK, and it was, especially on a busy day where the census is up to 20, 21, that is a busy day. One of the things that I know for me makes a big difference And it's nice. We don't get this in the ER a lot. Is going to the cafeteria and having lunch with the other hospitalists. Sometimes it's only 15 or 20 minutes, but just to get a little human contact, to talk about a case or vent for a minute, and just to kind of break that. I've noticed that doing, it's not going to make the whole day amazing, but it's one little step that makes, you start adding these things up, and it makes a difference.
Did you connect? Did you hear what he said that we just kind of might have gone over your head, but one of those key points as to why we get burned out? You said you work 12-hour shifts.
Right.
You said you work 7 in a row.
Yeah.
So you're working 84 hours a week. You know what a normal work week is?
Half of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we kind of grew up with this concept of working double. I mean, 60 hours a week would be time and a half. You're doing double. You're doing 84 hours a week. And we say, well, that's just normal. We have to be able to pull back and say, to question it.
I feel like you're my therapist right now. This is great.
5 cents.
Why
can't we question it?
Charges.
Yeah, why can't we make them 10-hour shifts? Why can't we have some of those shifts as a 6 hours? You come in, you get your discharges, and then the rest of the team is working that. Imagine if you got a string of 7 shifts, but the middle one was only 6.
Yeah.
We need to be creative. We need to come up with new ideas. We need to not accept the status quo that has led us to burnout.
There's certainly other ways to do it. The wheels are turning right now.
I can hear those gears grinding.
The president said we should do this, so we need to do it. It's it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to think that you can, do a job you want and actually be happy. You don't have to be miserable.
Right.
It doesn't have to be that way.
Right. And if it's happening to you, jump in early. Don't wait till you go down, and you actually have nothing left. Bring it up early. Say, hey, I'm concerned. You got a guy you can call, Gary Tampkin. You can call Larry Burchett. You can call those champs that you mentioned earlier. We're trying to get champs at all the different sites who can be a person at your site. And you can say, hey, I'm having some challenges. Maybe it's not even work. Maybe it's relationships. Maybe it's a death in the family.
Mm-hmm.
I know when my father died, I thought, well, he's older and I'm already in my 50s. It's expected.
Mm-hmm.
But it took me longer than I thought to come out of that. After all, I just lost my best friend. And so if that's happening to you, it can be normal. You need to reach out and say, hey, I need to take a little less work level, a little fewer shifts.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make it up in the second half of the year, but right now I just need a little bit more time.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to ask for that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's good to hear coming from you.
Yeah.
Real good to hear.
Should we take a break?
Yeah. Sounds good.
Is this where you want to go?
You're such a talent.
I'm just competing with Gary Tampkin. I'm a competitive guy. Gotta be better than him.
I'm gonna
From
send
the
it.
audience standpoint.
Switch out the battery.
What did you guys think? How'd it go?
I think it went. How do I stop this? The top?
Push the red button on the top right. There's a little
Over here?
Yeah.
It's like a.
Yeah, I'm not. This is your camera.
There's a. Look, no, he wouldn't.
We're back. I'm feeling pretty well.
I
I just did 4 nights in Madeira, by the way.
Those can be tough.
Those can be brutal, and they have this awful thing once a month that I always seem to show up for called downtime, where for 9 hours there's no medical record, there's no electronic record, so you're back to paper. The paper's actually nice, but the chaos is not.
You're back to paper, or was your scribe back to paper?
Shut up. So I was back to paper. The scribe was back to paper, but I had to go find the charts and but then the scribe leaves. This is a great story. Scribe leaves at 4 a.m. So from 4 a.m. till 7,
On your own.
you're on your own. So yes, I was back to paper for an hour, and it was miserable.
Yeah.
That part wasn't that bad, but this is a good story. A gender sing down there. So we come on, and I don't know who we took over for in Madeira, who the previous contract was.
See, he was before us.
And the structure of their scribes was, I don't know what they did with PAs, we did the same thing, but so we're on 12s, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And we have a scribe when we're there, start from 7 p.m., and the scribe leaves at 4 a.m. and there's a PA coverage that leaves at 6 a.m. And so it doesn't sound that bad. It's not very busy, but the experience is, especially if you're busy, you get tired. It's the end of the night. I get a little cranky when I'm on the first night, especially. And then the scribe bails and abandons me. And I get pissed when that happens. And then the PA leaves, and that's right at the end where it's like, I would give up the scribe from 7 p.m. to midnight if they would stay for those last hours, because that's like when I need them the most, because I'm a little drained at the end of the night. So gender got us, one of the first things, we've only been there a couple months, right? One of the first things he did was he got the scribe to stay the whole night. Yeah, it cost us a little bit extra. I don't know what the numbers are at the end, but so now I've done a whole bunch of shifts where the scribe leaves at 4, and now I've done, the last 4. I was the first one, because February 1st is when it started, so I did February 1st to the 4th. I did 4 with that scribe at the end. It makes a difference. It really makes a difference.
And the change happens because somebody speaks up. Nobody spoke up.
And he did something about it,
Right? And because our directors are working clinical shifts and they're working the night shifts, they experience it. I work in Madeira, so I experience it.
Have you worked in Madeira?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
And so that makes a real difference as opposed to an organization which has, the leadership high and mighty and they're never actually in the trenches. We're in the trenches. We experience it. And you say, hey, we got to make a change. I thought after 4 p.m. there'd be nobody in the ER for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Wasn't the reality. So then you do need that.
And so I feel great on the nights when it's busy, and then like the nights when it's not as busy and we're all sitting around, I kind of feel bad. Like I kind of feel guilty. I didn't whine about it, but
It's classic.
you gotta
make
balance, but I think it's overall better that way. Yeah. Especially because we've had some PA shortages that have put additional pressure, and burden on us.
Yeah, you're in
that
the
scribe
field.
helps.
You're in the field. You're talking to providers. You ever hear people say, "I just want to go to a different group because they're feeling burned out or frustrated"?
I don't hear different group a lot. I mean, different sites. Sometimes people want to move to a different site and they don't care what the group is.
Yeah.
And
sometimes we have this problem like burnout. We don't recognize it for what it is. And we just think, well, the grass is greener somewhere else. If I was only working somewhere else, I'd be feeling better. And I start hopscotching, trying to find an ideal place. When changing locations doesn't change what's going on.
Yeah,
inside.
maybe if you have that problem everywhere, maybe you're the problem.
Yeah, pretty uncommon that a provider will do well with nurses at one site and problematic with another. If you're having problems with nurses at 2 or 3 sites, probably you.
Let's talk about this for a minute, because a lot of this burnout stuff, I think everybody would agree, if you're suicidal or getting close to divorce because of all this, like that's severe burnout. Yeah, come talk to us and we'll help. But when I've talked to a lot of people about this, they don't want to use that word burnout. I'm not burned out. Like they're not that bad, But then I'll ask some questions like, are you happy with your job? Do you show up and do you take a good deal of pleasure on it? Or when you leave, do you feel completely exhausted? Do you dread coming? How much? There's degrees, right? There's a little bit.
It's sepsis, bro.
What?
Patient comes in and they're sick, but they're not that bad. Maybe they've got a cold, and I'll check. Well, they got a fever and they're tacky, but they're not that bad. They look pretty good. I'll do some blood work. Gee, the lactate's 5. And, we say, well, what the Sears criteria? Well, they got all of those.
Yeah.
The patient is sicker than you realized. They're really septic. Same thing for ourselves. Well, not that bad. Yeah, I do get cranky with nurses, but that's about it. Yeah, I don't really take much joy in taking care of people anymore, but that's about it. Yeah, I don't get much satisfaction at home anymore, but what do you expect? My kids are older and life's changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you're sicker, you're further down the path than you realize.
Little red flags.
Yep, and you can miss them.
So what would you say to these folks? What can they do?
So how in sepsis did we pick it up when we thought initially, well, the patient doesn't look that bad? We had an external validator which said, check the vital signs, check the lactate level. Something outside which forced you to say, whoa, worse than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
So your external validators may be your colleagues, your nurses, your significant other at home, and they may tell you, well, you're snappy at home. You don't see it. You're further along than you realize.
Maybe it's like you're suggesting they should ask, maybe even ask these people.
You gotta ask.
What would you ask?
And what if you asked and they said, no, you're as happy, jolly as you've ever been? Is there anything wrong with that? Makes you feel good. You ask everybody and everybody says, no, we love working with you. You'll feel good. So there's no downside to asking.
Yeah.
And if you ask and they say, well, back in January you changed. And I wasn't going to say anything, right? Because hierarchy, you're higher than the nurses. So they weren't going to say anything. But since you asked, I'm glad you asked, I can tell you this. And you're asking in a fashion that allows them to give you an honest answer. Hey, I'm curious, tell me what you think. And your significant other may have actually told you 3 or 4 times, but it went right over you. But now you ask, and they're like, duh, I've told you that 3 times, now you're listening? But my dad used to use a line, he used to talk about the teachable moment.
Mm.
He says, a lot of times I could just be talking to you, son, you just weren't receptive to it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are times when it's a teachable moment, I give you a lesson and it'll stick.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you start asking your spouse, your colleagues, your nurses, you're in that teachable moment because you're saying, I want to know.
You're open to it, yeah.
Yeah.
And the good thing is that's the beginning and things can get better.
Yeah. You have to recognize it. Dr. Drummond talks about something I think is really prevalent for a lot of
pulling
us.
out the manual.
5 flavors of provider conditioning. Tell me how many of these you have.
What page are we on?
We're on page 38.
Nice.
Tell me if you got any of these. Workaholic, superhero, emotion-free, lone ranger, perfectionist. Do you recognize 1 or 2 of those? You had to recognize. You wouldn't have got into medical school if you didn't have some of these.
Are these good things?
Well, they're part of what made us successful. It's the balance.
Yeah, it's hard.
You're cooking.
It's hard to separate all of it.
You're cooking. You're making dinner. You're putting some salt in. Is salt bad? Well,
Adds
a little bit of salt's good.
A little flavor.
A lot of salt's bad.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things, it's the balance. So workaholic. You got into medical school because you worked hard in your high school and college. And then you succeeded in medical school because you worked hard. So that behavior was rewarded. So you might have had traces of it, but my goodness, it was rewarded as you went along. The next one, superhero. We reward that one. You go pick up extra shifts, we're desperate, you jump in, we say, gosh, Larry's great, he jumped in, we were desperate for somebody who worked 5 shifts. We reward that behavior.
It's really funny you bring up the superhero thing because you and I were at Mount Shasta over Christmas. I think I did Christmas Eve night, you did Christmas Day, and then I did Christmas Day night.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Lone Ranger. There's
Yeah,
nobody else
that's
who
a
can
big
do it
one.
but me.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're isolated and alone, and is anybody else feeling this way? You don't even, or maybe you don't even allow it. John Wayne.
Perfectionist.
It's a big
You
one.
mentioned it, that one doctor already who was
That makes-
feeling unsatisfied with her career because she couldn't achieve perfection. And yet in medical school and residency, you were rewarded for that. You know, if you knew the labs better than anybody else, that was a plus.
There's 2 other things he talks about in the next pages that goes along with this. Physician's 2 prime directives. The patient always comes first, and number 2, never show weakness.
Here, here.
Now, this is the interesting thing that he counters this a couple pages later. I think this is worth bringing up while we're talking about this. It's okay, in fact, it's necessary to take care of my personal needs. It's okay to have times when I'm down, to ask for help. It's okay to delegate tasks. There's many places in life where good enough is good enough, not perfect, you know?
And to know your own weaknesses. I know that when I have to go in and tell a family that there's been a death, I can deliver the news almost too straightforward without enough of dealing with the emotions afterwards. But I recognized this early in my career, so whenever I go out, I always look around the ER, I say, who's the kind of the most huggy nurse in the department? I take her with me, and we go out there and tell the story. And then if I have to get back into the ED for the next patient, she's able to stay
She
with
can
the
stay
family.
and help in that moment. That's a good one. I don't have to have all the answers. That's hard for me. I mean, it's reality, really. You really don't have all the answers. But you gotta feel like you have to know everything, you know?
It makes it hard to practice sometimes. Your patient has a cold, you know they have a cold. You feel like, well, I better get a throat swab, or I better get a chest x-ray.
Certainty.
You already knew.
Yeah.
I remember when I was working overseas in Nicaragua, there was a book by World Health Organization called When There Is No Doctor.
Donde no hay doctor. I've read it. It's a good one. It's on my shelf.
Yeah. And it talked about pneumonia. You have no chest x-ray. But they talked about tachycardia, fever, auscultation of the lungs. And you realize, how often do you get an x-ray where you are surprised? You knew it was MB negative.
Most of the time, not. Yeah.
So
Sometimes.
we can make our practice a little easier if we say, trust in ourselves. We don't have to have every test.
What else we got? It's a good book.
Yeah.
Here, let me get so we're just actually kind of scratching the surface. So one thing he talks about is head trash. Dealing with your inner critic. So things that you kind of tell yourself, and it's along those same lines of perfectionism and being the Lone Ranger and I got to do it all. But part of the process internally is confronting that and dealing with that again in order to kind of be more fully satisfied, engaged, and enjoy what you're doing. So there's a whole chapter in here on how to do that, how to deal with your head trash, to identify it, let it go, and then, kind of better approaches to it instead of that. Your ideal practice. What's your ideal practice? I still think.
For me, it comes down to that isolated moment in the room with the patient.
Those moments.
Yeah, and so it's not really the larger, it's when I get into that room with that patient for that moment, that's kind of my ideal. Whether in a slow or a busy place, inner city or community, I get that one-on-one time.
Setting is less important than just that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly enjoy the rural communities. It took me a while to learn why that was for me, but I found for myself I need to be needed. And so at 5 o'clock, when I became the only doctor in the whole hospital, and this whole community was going to depend on me if there was a medical problem,
It's intense.
I was needed.
You like
And I
that?
made a difference.
Yeah.
I once had a practice where I worked where there were plenty of other providers to see everybody, and there was no need for me. I realized, if I called in sick today, it wouldn't matter. And I couldn't continue practicing.
Boy, what a business to be in. There's plenty of need.
And we are the safety net, so we've been given an opportunity that other fields don't have. That when patients have nowhere else to go, they can come to us. It's a privilege.
I have a question for you along the ideal practice, because you and I have an interest in international medicine. You did a lot of that earlier in your career. Now you're running the big company, and you're still seeing a lot of patients. You're still doing doctor clinical hours. What is your ideal practice? You ever going to do more of the international stuff? How do you
Along-
how do you do it all?
Yeah,
That is
as
the
I
question.
say, life happens to you while you're making plans. So for me, as my daughters grew up and get into soccer and the weekends are committed in the school, it became more difficult to go
Mhm.
overseas. Now I'm at the point in my career where that starts to open up again. I can be more free to go overseas. Well, you and I have been talking about
Mhm.
heading off to an island soon.
We should.
Heading off to
We should go to Haiti.
Haiti and working over there. It's now kind of the time, and so I put it off. And in life, sometimes we can defer gratification. After all, that's how we get through medical school, right? You could have more fun in college, you could have more fun, but you deferred gratification
In your
to
20s.
to achieve this bigger goal. Sometimes we get too good at it. Maybe that contributes to burnout. You defer gratification forever. Well, I've deferred my international opportunities for a while now. I'm getting to the stage where it's like I can do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why it was exciting when you invited me to go join you in Haiti.
Yeah, we need to do that. I, you know, life happens. I told you my plan before was to, you know, go to Africa and never come back, and couldn't sell my house, and I instead had a baby. You know, so things kind of changed, but somewhere in the ideal practice for me is continuing the international service to.
One of our doctors, Greg Higgins, works in Africa, been working there 4 years, comes back, he works for about 2 months, goes back out. Every 6 months he comes back for 2 months, makes some money, and goes back out.
That's a pretty cool thing. The you know, the VP supports that, and he's able to, you know, keep filling in and doing shifts for us like that.
You know, the providers, the physicians our group are independent contractors, which gives you a whole nother level of flexibility that you just don't get with a Kaiser or somebody like that.
Yeah.
And so every time Greg shows up, we're always saying, hallelujah, you're going to help out. The regular doctors can work less shifts. We have these places. He works, makes a difference for a couple months, has some money, he disappears, and the other people say it was great while he was here.
You know, with this burnout stuff, let me tell you a little story for me that made a difference. This one was at Hazel Hawkins, and this old Serrata, probably 80-year-old Serrata, came in, and he looked terrible. He'd just been discharged, and he was blue, and his SAT started to go down, and then his heart rate started to go down. I thought, oh boy, he's gonna code, you know. And I had asked his wife, what's his code status? She says, oh, he's DNR. She's in tears, and I was like, oh man, we're gonna have to figure this out pretty quick. So I said, ask the RT to put him on BiPAP. So we put him on BiPAP. His SAT went up. His heart rate started to go up, and I just like left the room because I had 10 other patients to see and run the rest of the ER, and forgot about it. It came back, you know, later, and he was fine. He was better, and we admitted him, and I didn't think anything of it, you know. And then later that day, I paused and I kind of got the nurses and RT together, and I was like, you know what? We saved that guy's life. It was nothing brilliant. It was nothing heroic. It was, I didn't even do it. You know, I don't know, the RT did. I don't know how to put the BiPAP on the guy. But sure made a difference to him and his wife. He's going to have this much more time. And so I just kind of paused in that moment, and I was like, hey, this is what doctors, like, we saved this guy's life. That's an incredible